Hey there, welcome to the Big Girl School Book Club. If you're just joining us, we are reading Roberto Valenzuela's Picture Perfect Practice, and we are already on chapter 10. And chapter 10 is patterns and repetitions. And I'll admit that I had a little bit more difficulty finding examples for this chapter because I don't think it's something I use a lot. I do and I don't. So it'll be an interesting discussion, and I look forward to seeing how you use it. So basically, what he says is when you get to a scene, or if you're doing a photo shoot, or if you're just out taking pictures, there's a lot of visual chaos. And so he uses patterns and repetitions to kind of hone in on exactly what you want to photograph. And we'll explain that a little bit more. But he says that patterns and repetitions are similar, but they're different. So patterns are something that repeat. There's a lot of them. A repetition might just be one or two. So they're similar, but they serve different purposes. So when we look at the examples that I found in my pictures, I'll try to explain that a little bit more. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's jump right in. So the first thing he says is that patterns bring harmony to a picture. So I tried to go through my pictures and look for examples that were similar to what he used in the book. There's a wide variety from pictures with people to still life to event photography to nature to architecture. So there's a lot of different examples. So hopefully something will speak to you. But he says patterns are easy on the eyes and they won't distract from your subject because they fill the entire frame. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of examples. Here is a senior picture that I did, and the pattern is the brick. And you can see it goes from left to right, and it covers the entire pattern. Therefore, it doesn't take away from my subject and his guitar, but it kind of adds a little bit of visual interest and texture to the background. Now, clearly, we had a lot of different patterns on this photo shoot, but here's another piece of architecture that had the same pattern from left to right, same shape, and it doesn't take away from him. It actually brings focus to him because he breaks the pattern. So one of the first assignments that Roberto says is to use your tunnel vision and isolate patterns. So look for bricks, plants, leaves, flowers, designs. Look for 15 different patterns, and you can just take a snapshot with your iPhone. So here's another one. I was just doing some event photography, and the desserts made a nice pattern. There's even a little geometry in there as well. So you'll notice that a lot of the chapters that we've already studied kind of overlap. So one thing is when you break the pattern, it helps you notice it. So in this case, this towel in the background with all the little polka dots, we've got Abby here with her matching sunglasses and the reflection in her sunglasses. And so the pattern makes a nice pleasing background, and then she breaks the pattern. And this one I was going to show you because I actually cropped it, and I cropped it in a little bit. It was a cute picture without the crop, but when you bring in the crop and really isolate the pattern, I think it makes it a lot more impactful and a little bit more thought out. Now imagine, if you will, on this one, in my head I envisioned a lot more red caps, and I envisioned her head turning and looking at me. So it wasn't quite the one I thought I had, but envision, if you will, a sea of red swim caps, and everybody's looking one way, and then you have one person turn towards you. That would be an example of breaking the pattern. He uses an example of, say there's 20 green umbrellas and there's one red umbrella. That breaks the pattern, and it takes your eye to the red umbrella. So think of ways that you can look at a scene where everything is sort of similar, and then how can you break that pattern with your subject, whether it's a person, whether it's an object that's similar but a different color, etc. So these are the things that we're training our eye to see so that we can bring more variety to our photos. So let's go ahead. I thought this was a great example. Hold on, not that one. So this one, he talks about having tunnel vision. So you can see the picture on the left. I didn't even edit it because it just kind of looked like I took it with an iPhone. There really wasn't a well thought out background, but you can see over here that we've got these, I think they're aspen trees. I hope that's right. We've got this repetitive pattern of trees over here. And while the entire scene doesn't make for much of a photo, if we zoom in over here on the trees and we just use the repetition, the pattern of the trees as the background, and then we add her in as the subject, it actually makes a really pleasing background from not only the pattern and repetition standpoint, but the color of the trees, the color of her outfit, the pop of red on her lips. It makes a huge difference. So you can see a big difference between kind of using the entire scene on the left and really using tunnel vision and just focusing in on the pattern and repetition of the trees and how much different it looks. And also, just one little side note, I used a long lens, which also compresses the trees together, adds a little bit of blur, and makes it a much more interesting photo than the more wide angle lens that I used on this side. So if we look at it, I was using a 28-75 and I shot at 38, so that's pretty wide. And over here, I used my 70-200 and I shot at 167. So I was really zoomed in on the one on the right with a long lens. And on the one on the left, I used a more wide angle lens shooting wide. And that's really the difference that the look will give you and helps you to get that tunnel vision that you want with the pattern in the ground, if that makes sense. If you have questions, let me know. So this photo I took in 2004. This was one of my earliest assignments when I was taking photography classes at the local community college. They told us to go out and look for patterns and repetition. So this is something basic that you can do to start to train your eye. So I just thought this was kind of fun because it's one of the earliest things that I actually started practicing. Now here is another example, this beautiful road, looking down. So we've got leading lines here, we've got symmetry, but we also have the pattern and repetition of the trees. And so here on the other side, we added the subject to this picture. And you can see he is perfectly symmetrical, and then we've got the dogs a little bit off to the left to give it a little bit of tension, not quite so symmetrical, but we still have that symmetry, we still have that pattern and repetition, and everything leads to the subject. So that makes a really, really beautiful photo. Now here's an example where I used lights. So the beams of light at the concert, I was there to photograph the videographers or the video guys. And I saw him standing backstage and he was filming one of the drummers or something like that. But I saw that he was sort of standing between the patterns of light. And Roberto talks about this as making your subject as part of the repetition. So adding your subject right into the repetition. And then here on the left, I've always loved this picture. So it was kind of a spray of light that's coming down. And then I've got just the outline of my subject and he's lit from behind, but he's against a repetitive pattern, and really all those lights bring the focus right to him, even though you don't see his face and you don't see a lot of the photograph. That pattern and repetition brings it right to him. And again, here is, I think this was in Puerto Rico, and I was just noticing the pattern. And what would be cool, I've seen someone else do this, I think it was Kirsty Larmore, she had a similar picture to this, but she actually had her daughter kind of running from left to right, and she did kind of a leap between there. And so this would be a neat place to add your subject, either right here or right here in this light. That would add them into the repetition and kind of give the picture a little bit more of a dynamic feel. So this is like a fine picture, but it would be a lot cooler if there was somebody walking through it, or, you know, just some sort of subject that kind of breaks up the repetition a little bit. Now this is near the World Trade Center Memorial in New York City, and this is, you can walk to the subway line. And I really liked the repetition here of all the different patterns. Even on the screen, you've got the repetition of the advertisement, so the knives and forks going all the way. And then the subjects are just added in there, and I slowed the shutter speed down so that I could show the movement, so it could look like it was busy. But really the cool part was like all the repetition that just takes your eye all the way through to the subway entrance and exit. Now here's another example that I found. You can see not only are there repetitions in the beams above her, in the windows beside her, but there's also repetitions of lights for the shadows on the ground. And so I'm inserting her into one of the light squares. And so this kind of just, everything sort of just leads to her. And it's another way to add visual interest to the photo. Now this one, this was an event, and there was a really cool background that had a lot of patterns. And I think my job in this particular thing was to take pictures of the table settings so that they could use it for their website and things like that. So I liked this because the pattern in the background gave a little bit of texture, color, and visual interest without taking away from the centerpiece. Again, this is in Manhattan Beach. It's underneath the pier. So we've got the repetition, and again, I used a longer lens, 100 millimeter, so it's a little bit longer, so it compresses the beams. They look a little bit closer together. So if I were to take this with my iPhone, it would look slightly different. The beams would probably look further apart because I wouldn't have that compression from the lens. And then I do have the spray of water that's coming through, so that kind of adds a little bit of movement and motion. Again, this would be neat if I had some sort of human subject, but it's not necessary. If you don't have a human to photograph, you can still do this. You know, the water becomes the subject, the spraying water. Now this is a repetition. It also has symmetry, and really the focus is on the fountain. And so the way that both the architecture and the photograph were taken is that the repetition of the palm trees all lead your eye towards the central focus, which was the fountain. And I think this is the way that he says you place your subject within the repetition. So I didn't actually place my subject, the architects did, but this is an example. You could easily have the same idea where you have a couple or a person or whatever right in the middle of your repeating pattern. Now here, this isn't an awesome photo or anything, but I was walking in the woods, and you can see all the repetition of the trees, right? You've got all this, and I saw on the path, I saw a kid coming through on his bike, and so I sort of waited until he got right here because I wanted to get him centered between the two trees. And so again, I've got this repetition of all these trees, and then I've got my subject coming through. If I had more time to plan it, this was just sort of off the cuff, I might have slowed down the shutter speed, have him whizzing through. There's lots of creative things that you can do, but I thought this might just spark an idea for you in a kind of normal place. All the leaves are out now. This was taken a few months ago, so it might not be as easy as it was. Here, I see the repeating pattern. This could be parallel lines. This could be, you know, almost a silhouette. So there's a lot of things that we've already studied in the book club. But here we've got the repetition of the waves, the layers of the waves, and then we've inserted our subject among that. And so this repetition here doesn't take away from the subject. It actually kind of brings some focus and adds some context. So we know that he's a surfer, we know he's at the ocean, we know that it's a pretty rough day out there, probably a pretty good day for surfing. It helps tell the story. Here we've got a repetition of people. So they're all wearing the same outfit, they all have similar ponytails, they're all wearing the same hat. So just kind of a fun perspective. Here we are at the High Museum of Art in downtown Atlanta, and I just put Cameron, my daughter, in among these repeating patterns of the side of the building. So very simple, but it adds a little bit of interest to the background rather than just a plain background. Now this one, I'll tell you why I chose this. So this is the College Football Hall of Fame. I was shooting an event, and I liked this repeating pattern of all these different college football players and events. This makes for a nice, kind of a nice background. This would have been really cool if I would have had a subject, like right here. This would have been a perfect place to put a human, or, somebody taking a picture as they walk in. So I like the layout of this. I like the repetition. I like the reflection up here. I like the colors. I think the only thing that it's probably lacking is a subject, and it would have been really neat to put something right here, maybe an action to show a little bit more of the event. But again, I wanted to show the repetition and how you can use that in your photo. And then finally, I thought this is a great photo. We've got the repetition, we've got geometry, we've got parallel lines. We've got a lot going on in this photo, but I don't think any of that takes away from the subject. I think the white, the neutral white, the repeating patterns, and the fact that she sort of goes right in this one, I think it all brings your eye right to her, and it gives a little bit of a visual interest and more like an urban feel from her outfit, from the setting, etc. So this is a way that you can use these repeating patterns and not distract the eye. If there would have been random stuff all over the place, I think it would be totally different, but because it's clean and repeating, it works really, really well in this photo. So I hope that helps you. I hope that it's a very short chapter. And then I'd love to see what you come up with, or if you have any questions, or if you find that you use this technique a lot or that you don't. Go ahead and post your pictures. You can join our private Facebook group, or you can post them on Instagram and use the hashtag #TheBigGirlSchool. And we love to feature our book club members or participators. We love to post your pictures and show what you come up with. So let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.